Hey guys, I'm Nick and welcome to Sci-Finatics. It's my absolute pleasure today to have on the show a legend of Star Trek. He's been in Next Generation, he's been in Voyager, and of course Picard, one of our favourite XBs. I'd like to welcome Jonathan Del Arco.
How are you guys? How is Australia?
Australia is very good. It's it's like the rest of the world. We're all stuck at home,
Right.
talking to people as we are now. It's a thing of the world now, isn't it?
It is. It's a very strange new reality. I feel like you're in your own spaceship, right?
Absolutely, yes, it is. It's been over 25 years since you last appeared as Hugh in The Next Generation. Now, tell me about what it was like when the producers sort of first contacted you about reprising your role in Picard.
We were at the Hollywood Bowl, which is this music venue that has a picnic area, and we were having dinner with Jerry Ryan and James Duff, who was one of the early on producers of the show. And he said he was working on this Star Trek show. At the time, Patrick wasn't involved. And what did we think about bringing the Borg back with Seven and Hugh? Would we do it? And that was the moment. And then it took about a fair amount of time, about 8 months or so, to get the actual offer and to realize it was actually happening. It's one thing to hear, we're thinking of doing it, we're talking about you being in it, and it's another thing when it's actually on paper. So it was a long process. Yeah, I mean, I knew about the show for a really long time before anyone else did too, because I was approached so early. So it was a very exciting and thrilling time for myself and for Jerry as well. The idea of bringing, and scary too, of bringing these characters back.
Yeah, absolutely. Back in the 90s, when you were cast in Next Generation, were you a fan of Star Trek before coming part of it, or did you kind of become a fan through your involvement in the show?
Multiple layers to that. I used to watch the original series in reruns when I was a kid. I learned English watching television, so that was one of the shows I used to watch when I was little. And so I was a fan of the original series, and I actually tested for the role of Wesley when I was in living in New York. Yeah. How weird would that have been, right? Yeah. So I think I was destined to be on the show by hook or by crook, it seems. And so my fandom really extended to the original series. And then as I did, Next Gen, there was no streaming at the time. There was no way to really, you had to have a big old VHS collection to really catch up on the show.
Of course.
So I didn't really catch up on the show until way later. And, through the fandom of the Star Trek fans and the conventions, I, became a Next Gen fan that way, indirectly through the fans' love of the show. I got an education really fast.
That's fantastic. Every time you've played Hugh in Star Trek, he's kind of gone through a major change. He sort of starts as your typical Borg drone in iBorg, who becomes an individual through Descent Part 1 and 2. And then obviously in Picard, you're the director of the Borg Cube artifact in Picard. What was it like sort of playing the character through these very different phases of his life?
It's been a long time since I played the part, so it wasn't that difficult to restructure who he was. Clearly, he's a very dramatic character because every time he's been on the show, something big has happened, I recreated him with an eye to keeping some of the original things that made it work for the audience, and obviously the sense of innocence and the sense of hope and innocence shattered by this new world for him. But I did everything I could to keep that internal heart that he had in the beginning. So it was just a very, both times playing the part has been incredibly emotional for different reasons. When I first created the role, I was inspired by my partner that had died of AIDS. And so I was playing him as someone with dementia normally has an inability to comprehend things, curiosity, Those were like the things I tapped into initially. And then this time around, I used myself as an adult male, having lived through a lot of things on my own and a lot of loss. And so, I was able to put my own life back into who he is, and remembering that the common denominator in both performances is me.
Absolutely, yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, the actor brings their life, whatever that means, to the role. So I really tried very hard to bring as much of my own honest experiences to the part so that it would be effective.
Absolutely, that's a fantastic story. How do you think Hugh has changed in the years since we've seen him last? Did you kind of work with the writers or producers on sort of filling out some of his backstory in the years since we've last saw him?
Absolutely. We had a lot of conversations about what might have transpired. Some of it, we made up because it wasn't canon. It wasn't really referred to. I mean, I know a lot of the fans have said, "Oh, we wish we would have seen like how he got to where he is."
Yeah.
And how so the basic framework of what ostensibly happened to him was that he was left on that planet when we saw him in Descent Part 2, and he did become a leader of that of the XBs on the planet. He and the XBs on that planet became Federation citizens, and we had a connection to the Federation. And then when the incident with the artifact happened, I was to go man it, because I was the only one that had experience, leaving the collective and becoming individuals. That was this journey. He took the assignment because he cared about the artifact and the XBs that were in it. I think he felt like he needed to stay in order to maintain order, in order for horrible things not to happen to the XBs. And in some sort of way, he kind of made a deal with the devil in a way to be a part of that reclamation project, but then also with an eye toward saying, my being here as a representative of the Federation will keep the Romulans from doing horrible things, which of course we now know didn't really work out.
That's right.
Didn't work out well for him.
Work out too well for poor old Hugh.
Yeah.
Now, working on the show, what was it like working on Picard? How did that differ as a sort of filmmaking experience for you versus how it was back in Next Generation?
I mean, it's night and day.
Oh, really?
I mean, Next Generation had some really good budget for its time.
Yeah.
I believe the show maybe cost them $1 million an episode back in the day, which is a lot of money. But when you look at Next Gen, you could still see, like the funny rocks. I mean, I think the cinematography by the time I did iBorg, there was a lot more extravagant cinematography. But even the planet where I land, where I crash the cube and then leave, was a sound stage.
Yes, which you're looking back, you can kind of tell now. I suppose back then we're a bit more innocent. I think back in those days in terms of what we. Yeah. And also got to remember everything was in standard def, not high definition back then. So you kind of could get away with a lot more, I suppose.
Absolutely. And so working on this was just such an epic production. I mean, everything about the experience was just larger than life. The secrecy around my being back, the secrecy around my makeup, all the sort of like things we had to do to hide, and not being able to tell friends that I was on the show. It was a very weird few months until we announced at Comic-Con that Jerry and I were back. It was very fun, like the whole cloak and dagger, literally cloak, because I didn't get cloaked, but Jerry and Brent had to wear a cloak when they walked around. But my makeup was different enough that they didn't think I needed that.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, there was something really fun about that. But also, like, the scale. I mean, we had 5 or 6 sound stages. My set expanded from... the Borg Cube was 2 different sound stages, which is a lot. There were basically two actual big sets that were the Borg Cube, that were spaces that could be turned into various levels of the cube. So it was a really ingenious design. And so working on something that's real as an actor, it's very, very helpful because
Absolutely.
you can just do your work and show up and feel like you're supported by, the other artists. I mean, there were so many great designers and makeup artists and, from every respect, everyone, the best of the best showed up to do the show.
It was like a 9-hour feature film. It was, you
Yeah.
could tell like
Yeah.
the level of production value was just through the roof. I absolutely loved the reunion scene between your character and Picard when they met again after so many years on the Artifact there. What was it like to play that scene with Patrick Stewart?
Really emotional, frankly. I lost my dad about 18 years ago now, something like that. And when I was working on that one moment, that everyone talks about, that hug, that was not scripted. I mean, there was a couple of like descriptions of him not falling, the XB pulling him up, us talking to each other, but nothing was written about us exchanging any kind of handshake or anything. And so we were rehearsing, and Patrick said, I think we should, shake hands or something. And I said, I'd like to hug you if that's okay.
Absolutely.
And he said, oh, let's try it. He said, let's try it. And so we did. And, the director, Maya, came back and she goes, that choked me up.
Yeah.
And the group was like all misty-eyed. And I have no idea quite why it was such a powerful moment. I think it has to do with we all have that desire to connect to our parents,
Absolutely,
and to, I always thought of that moment in playing it, that it was what you see at international terminals, when people haven't seen each other in 20 years or 30 years. Have that. So it was, it was like Jonathan hugging Patrick and hugging my own past, and Jonathan hugging his dad again. And the question I asked myself before I did it, if that was my dad, what would I do? If I hadn't seen my dad in now almost 20 years, and suddenly he's standing in front of me, what is the first thing I would do? And I just went with that instinct.
Absolutely. And a great instinct that it was. It was such an emotional moment. And I remember watching that scene and, getting a lump in my throat. Watching that, it definitely had that emotional weight to it, I felt.
Good. I was shooting for that.
Great. Do you think when we see Hugh, he's sort of become better adjusted to his time as a drone and regaining his individuality? That process has been easier for him than, say, Seven or Picard, who still seem very, very scarred by their past Borg experiences. Do you think he's better adjusted to it?
That's a really interesting question. I mean, absolutely much better adjusted to it than Picard, because, obviously he's still, when he came back to the Artifact, was still responding to trauma. It'd be interesting to know, there is a very rich relationship between Hugh and Seven that is never mentioned. It's like so subliminal, she apparently gave him that Ranger thing.
Rangers,
and I could only imagine at some point they were cohorts of sorts and went different directions, it would seem, in terms of like her being more of a vigilante and him saying, no, we have to work the system. We have to figure out how we take where we are and we change people's minds about the XBs. It's not about killing people. It's about changing hearts and minds. So I think they both are very different. I love that they both, even though they're both Borg, had very different takes on what comes next in a world falling apart. It's hard to say better adjusted, right? Because it's like...
Well, because Hugh, obviously, Hugh doesn't go by 3 of 5 anymore. He goes by Hugh, but yet Annika still goes by 7 after all these years.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think adjusted in the sense of like he has figured out what his role is in the world and how he can contribute, right? And so I think he has found a mission, okay? But that doesn't mean that he isn't completely broken inside and sad and depressed, and I think he fights those demons all the time in that horrible condition that he's in, and seeing, his loved ones vis-a-vis the XBs be treated poorly, that is devastating to him. Certainly in my last episode of season 1, when I watch her kill my guys, that is a heartbreaking thing for him.
Absolutely.
It breaks him. It really does crush every little bit of hope he had. And then the love for Elnor and the fact that this young person is here to help him, and the bond that they quickly build, even though we don't really see it on camera. We only had a couple of scenes together, but it was like we had to get to a really quick bond. I was about to die in his arms.
Because there was so much going on, I suppose. Picard and Soji being on Nepenthe, visiting the Rikers. There's all this stuff going on with obviously Elnor and Hugh and being captured by Narissa and everything. There's a lot that goes on there that we don't see. We sort of come in at the sort of tail end of what's happened.
Yeah, because they obviously plan out a plan to take over. I mean, Hugh does, to take over the cube, and I don't think that comes quickly. We don't see it on camera. So we as actors had to fill the middle ground of that. To get to that good place, so that scene would be powerful as well. Did
you have a favorite scene or moment from your appearances in season 1?
The scene it got cut a lot. It was much longer. The scene where I get tortured by her was by that I mean watching my guys get killed. Personally, for me, that was my most the moment I'm most proud of as an actor, because I really had to spend about 7 hours in that state.
Wow.
And that's not easy to do, especially if it's not something you do. Male characters normally get to have that kind of an emotional, moment. It was really real for me, and staying in that moment for, as you say, 7 hours. That's got to be emotionally exhausting for you as an actor, kind of to hold that for that long. Yeah. And someone asked me actually on Twitter the other day about the scene after that when Elnor finds him and how he's just empty, he's just spent emotionally on. And someone asked me on Twitter, was that a choice or how interesting and all that? And I said, I actually was completely spent. At that point. We shot that right after the guys get killed, and I had been crying for 7 hours, just bawling my eyes out.
Yeah.
And so I was empty. I was completely catatonic. And people that go through a trauma like that tend to get that way. And then really helpful for me, because what I did not want was a schmaltzy death. I hate when actors cry when they're dying. In my experience, the person dying has little self-pity. They are more concerned about the people they're leaving behind and making sure that those people know they love them, making sure those people know what they should go do with their things, like him, protecting the other. I think that was really helpful for me. So by the time we got to film the death scene, pretty much the emotion was pretty much gone for me anyway. I mean, I like as an actor to let the audience feel the emotion, so I don't, fight against it. So it was a very full day. I shot all that in one day. So my cocktail was well deserved that night.
Oh, absolutely, yes, absolutely, for sure. Speaking of favorite moments, did you have a favorite moment in season 1 that didn't involve you? What was your favorite moment, just as a fan or as an actor?
I mean, obviously the first scene, with "I don't want the game to end."
Oh yes, the card game with Data.
Yeah, that was just broke my heart.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I loved Laris. I loved Orla's performance. I loved all the stuff that happened on the vineyard and that relationship he had with the caretakers.
Oh, I think we that connection was so good, and I think their performances as well were so great.
Wonderful.
I kind of found like I missed those characters, because once we'd gotten past episode 3 or something, we never saw them again for the rest of the season. They were great characters in those first 3 episodes, and really grounded and gave a lot of emotional weight to the start of Picard's journey in the show.
I also loved Jerry's entrance.
Oh, Jerry's entrance was fantastic.
Yeah, very funny. Where she falls out of frame and you
Yeah,
just give a clunk.
yes.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
It's really funny. Jerry and I and my husband Kyle, we did the cruise. We did the Star Trek cruise, and then we spent 2 days in Puerto Rico because it was my birthday before the lockdown. So
Yep. Okay.
don't feel too bad for me. I had a Puerto Rico vacation.
Just snuck in there just in time, I think.
Yeah, but yeah. So we were away from LA. They needed her to ADR, which is doing a voiceover over something that you didn't film. Yeah, and she had to do ADR. For that kick that she does. This is for Hugh, So we spent about an hour in this hotel room trying to find the quietest place for her to do that. Like at one point I had her in the closet screaming, "This is for Hugh."
Oh.
That's kind of now my new favorite moment because it has a personal memory attached.
Yeah. Yes. I wonder what your neighbors thought on the
right?
on the cabin next door or something.
Right.
In real life, you have a fantastic friendship with Jerry Ryan, but you unfortunately didn't get to play any scenes with her on the show. I heard you kind of helped out each other quite a bit in terms of your preparation for your performances.
She really helped me calm down. Before getting the mask done, they you have to do a life cast, which they cover your head in all kinds of things, and I'm claustrophobic, so she really got me through that panic attack, and then I got her through the panic attack of trying to figure out how to rebuild Seven because she was very nervous about it. So we had each other's back. So it's really good to have a good friend that is a part of the same world that you're in, and you're on the same journey with them. So it's really, really very lucky to have her in every way. She's one of the most kind and extraordinary people I know.
It's fantastic that you've got that friendship, and obviously you both, being legends of Star Trek, were able to coach each other through those moments of preparation and everything. That when I was watching the first season, I was anticipating a scene between Seven and Hugh, and then when Hugh died, it's like, I think one of my first responses was, "Oh no,
yeah,
Hugh and Seven aren't going to have a scene together now."
I know. That storytelling, I have no idea what their idea was on that, and also I didn't have a scene with Geordi. Nor was I allowed to ask about him. So
that's of course because Geordi was the one that essentially kind of who was Hugh's kind of first friend, really. He gave Hugh his name.
Primary relationship with the people on the starship. So I said, shouldn't I ask about Geordi? They're like, no. Okay. We're gonna figure you guys talk all the time. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Yes.
They don't let us write the shows. They just want us to act them. Yeah.
Yes. Maybe they're holding Geordi's involvement off to season 2 because I think LeVar Burton commented the other day that he would be appearing in season 2 of the show. So maybe there'll be a little moment between Picard and Geordi, kind of having a drink, for Hugh or something like that. Perhaps you had a lot of scenes with Isa. Is it Isa or Issa Briones? Issa Briones. Tell me, what was it like working with her?
Oh, she's the best. She's really fun, wise beyond her years. I cannot believe she's just turned 21. Wow. I mean, just astonishing that she has the confidence to do that kind of great work at that age, So we actually worked together a long time because we were in rehearsal before we began shooting. We had a couple of weeks of downtime that we were brought in to rehearse. Mm-hmm. And so I think that initially that was probably meant to be a longer relationship with me and her. I mean, the writing kept changing as we went along. But yeah, she was a really big part of Hugh's connection to the show, in terms of what's happening now and wanting to protect her. I worked really, really hard on figuring out what the relationship substitution might be for me personally with Soji. At the beginning, we only had the script we were shooting, so we didn't really know where we were going, right? Yep. And in terms of his relationship with Soji, and actually just who Hugh was in general, seemed decidedly unsettled. Like there's something a little creepy about him. We're not quite sure if this guy is like a good guy or not. Because why is he working with the Romulans? So I wondered whether there was a sinister reason behind it. And then I toyed with the idea of like, was he in love with Soji? Was that like what he was, and then I finally realized that what I had for her was this deep sense of admiration. And I actually found old footage of Princess Diana going to visit an AIDS clinic in the 90s and shaking hands. It was a very moving. I remember seeing it when I was a young man. It was a big moment. Now that we're in COVID, it's perfectly apropos to sort of compare. At the time, because AIDS was an unknown, people knew, scientists knew you couldn't catch it from touching someone, right? But the public was scared of it. And she made a point to go to that AIDS clinic without her, take her gloves off and shake the hand of the patient. Yeah. And to me, that was the kind of compassion that Soji was showing the XBs. And so I actually played that little video of when instead of watching her do it, I played that video of Princess Diana and got myself to a place that was what you saw on camera.
Yeah, wow, that's fascinating. Now, at what point did you find out your character was being killed off? Was that something you knew right from the get-go before even agreeing to coming back? Or was that something you kind of, you've got your scripts and you're reading through and it's like, hang on episode, what's going on here?
Yeah.
At what point did you find out that?
I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, so I'm just going to say I didn't know when I signed on, and I found out somewhere along the process that it was going to happen. Right. But initially, I was like, "What the?" It took a little bit of time to kind of accept that was, where we were going. Yeah. To the extent that people actually die on Star Trek, right?
Yes, yes.
It's like, very interesting science fiction world that way.
That's right. And look, there's always flashbacks or prequels or whatever. You never know. Who knows? Your death scene that sort of played out with Elnor, my fellow Aussie, Evan Evagora. Tell me a little bit about that scene and the actual doing that scene with him. Was that a difficult scene?
I'll preface this by saying Hugh is not gay, because the network wanted me to be very clear about that. But I am. And I toyed with my mind with the idea that it would be very interesting if this was the first time Hugh felt love for someone. And so it's kind of a love scene in a way, because he's cradling him and Hugh is thanking him for giving him hope again. Yeah. And so you could take that into any variety of ways that you can. The way I took it was for the first time Hugh felt love for someone and was leaving them in danger and behind. Okay. And so it upped the stakes for me that way. Yeah, for sure. And my desire for him to be okay, like the desire for him to be okay after I leave. If I didn't love him, I wouldn't really care. Yeah, yes. You know what I mean? Yep, so, and to thank someone, if you think about a character like Hugh or even Seven, so I think Seven had romantic encounters on Voyager, but
I think she had a relationship with Chakotay, I think, for a brief period of time.
He has been kind of a monk, as far as we know. He has lived his life in service to the XBs. There was zero reference to his sexuality or, any of that. So I felt it was kind of an open field for me to use myself again, and so that's the direction I went.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, fascinating. With obviously the whole thing with your character being killed off or whatever. Obviously, myself and many fans were absolutely gutted when that happened. There were rumblings there, obviously, of Hugh staging a full uprising against the Romulans and retaking the cube. I mean, obviously, that would have been great to see. Are there any other unfinished business or anything you would have liked to see Hugh wrap up? Had he been able to stay with us a little bit longer?
It would have been fun to explore what I just said about his personal life, and like falling in love, what that would be like for an XB. Obviously, I would have liked to just, as an actor, have been on the show a lot longer, but there's no sense in hoping what could have been when you've already done what is. you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
So no, I mean, I think it's look, I would have done the role even if I knew I was dying,
yeah.
you know. So it was an honor and a pleasure to get to continue his story and have this new element to who he is, to continue the legacy of you know, his character on Star Trek.
Yeah.
So all that's been really, really positive, and I love that he died sacrificing himself for Picard. You know, to not give away Picard's location, that he was a hero. You know, like, those are all
Yeah,
good for me.
absolutely.
Yeah.
The Borg as a race can be quite unemotional and very, just mindless kind of, the automatons that we sort of know. But
Right.
being able to have Hugh kind of, be the spokesperson for them and so forth, I thought, brought a definitely new level to the Borg, the way the XBs were more humanized,
Right.
particularly the scene with Hugh leading Picard through the various different kind of medical stations, saying, "Oh, we're building them back again. This is the work we're doing," and showing them having their implants sort of removed and fixed up and everything, and just returning a bit of humanity to them. I think that definitely Hugh's involvement in that, I think, brought a whole new level of appreciation for who the Borg actually are, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the character has always been a character that's breaking the mold of what you think people ought to be, right? Like, you think the enemy should be this way, but in fact, the enemy is vulnerable, and the enemy sometimes isn't the enemy. The enemy sometimes is the victim. And so that's like, those are really fun themes to kind of, look at in Star Trek in general.
Tell me a little bit about the makeup. What was the makeup process this time around compared to the last time you'd played Hugh back in Next Generation?
The actual makeup process and prosthetic wearing was a piece of cake. I mean, it was very little, really. When you get down to it, just this eye had been scarred up, and then I had some scars here, and, painting of the face, and that was pretty much it. So very different from the original Next Gen, where I wore basically something that covered everything, including my ears, so I couldn't really hear. And, where my head was locked in this hot plastic or latex headpiece.
Yep.
And everything was heavier before. It wasn't as comfortable. So the actual makeup was a cinch. It was, my panic really was more about getting my face covered to get the imprint done, right? That was what I was completely. I almost said I don't want to do the job. So
oh wow!
Yeah, I was like, I can't. I had big phobia about it, and they were really great. They knew I had the phobia, and they, Jerry came with me. I did take a Xanax.
What did Jerry say or do to kind of help you through that process?
She was just there, and she was talking to me and kept checking in on me, and she was just there with me for the day. So I knew that if I got to a place where I was completely freaking out, she would be my advocate and make them take it off me.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, you poor thing. I don't envy anybody who had to, because it must be a bit like being buried alive to a certain extent, sort of thing. I guess it's.
It was. And they kept one eye open because I didn't need the cast of this eye. Yep. And so I could see and I could breathe.
Yep.
And my mouth was open. Mm-hmm. So it just felt more like a big facial.
Yes.
Then, which I don't like to get either because I'm claustrophobic. So.
Yeah. How are you with the contact lens? Is that you okay with them or?
Ooh, that was kind of brutal. Yeah. Actually, I got a really bad ulcer in my eyeball.
Oh no!
In that eye, the contact lens. So ostensibly, I probably scratched it and it got infected.
Ooh.
And very, very painful, like light sensitive, all of that. So there was also a lot of smoke on set. So smoke machines to create the environment. So that was a little touch and go because I almost couldn't make that shoot, and they were trying to figure out because it was going to take about 10 days for the eye to fully heal.
Wow.
And basically they said, look, we could CGI the eye and sort of put you in a room where you're not around the smoke. What do you want to do? And one of the Peyton, who plays Narissa, had another gig to go do. So it would have meant that I would have had to shoot all of that where she's torturing me without her.
Oh no!
That they would have shot her.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I can't do that to her either
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's a really big scene for her, and for her to not have me there to do this big scene, and then the death, all of it,
Mm.
So I spit the bullet, and I didn't wear any contacts. I was blind as a bat when I shot that episode.
Yep.
And it CGI'd the eye.
Okay, wow.
So-
Yeah, because I think I remember seeing they released a trailer or some promotional photos or something before
you saw that.
Yes, yeah, there was a trailer, and it's like, hang on, because obviously, when you're doing a Star Trek YouTube channel, you tend to watch trailers through kind of, with a fair high degree of detail. And I noticed, hang on, he hasn't got his eye. I thought, and I'm starting to think, does this mean he gets an eye transplant or something in the show or whatever? But no, obviously, just the CG hadn't been put in there yet.
Yeah, it was a quick take too, so I don't think they were too worried about it. But I caught it, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe they put this out there.
Yes.
Maybe someone didn't realize it when they did it, but it was that tricky thing with the eye.
Apart from Hugh, do you have a favorite Star Trek character?
Spock.
Because he was your first introduction to Star Trek, before working on the show.
Maybe. I mean, I love how he's just a cool dude,
Mm-hmm.
Like I love sort of the ultimate chill vibe of Vulcan.
Yeah.
I just thought, I think it's because I have an affinity to it because I watched it as a kid.
Yeah. Did you enjoy Ethan Peck's performance in Discovery last season?
Yeah, I did. I think he's amazing. Yeah.
Is there a character you would have liked to spend more screen time with in season 1 of Picard?
Well, Jerry.
Yeah, that's what I thought you'd say. Yes.
And any more time with Patrick would be welcome.
Yeah.
So and actually Elnor as well. I love Michelle Hurd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's great.
There was no way that the two of them ever got to meet. That would have been cool. A little bit more with the crew of La Sirena would have been nice.
What was it like back in the 90s when you got your first action figure?
Mind-blowing.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a crazy thing to have a very accurate, action figure. And all those things that happened after Star Trek, back in the 90s. I wasn't famous, but in Trek world, I had a little cult following, I had a little cult fame. It was neat. They had a lot of product with Hugh on it.
Yeah.
There was a lot of things that I would sign along the way, lunch boxes and tiny little toys and all sorts of things. And they're still out there. People still bring them to conventions, and I still sign them.
I think it would be fair to say that iBorg probably goes down as in the top 10 of best Next Generation episodes. I think a lot of people would probably share my opinion on that.
It was a beautifully written episode, iBorg. It had a lot of heart, and it had a lot of Trek in it, in terms of how we view the enemy and all that. And I think it was beautifully shot as well, I thought. All the performances were great. Whoopi was great. Patrick was great. LeVar, obviously. Everybody, like it was a wonderful... you seldom get an opportunity when you're a guest on a television series to have a role that isn't a regular that has an effect on everybody,
Absolutely, yeah.
And it was just a really, really juicy part. It kept me afloat for many years. I thank the fans all the time. I mean, there were lots of years that the only income I had was signings and conventions, and so as an actor, like the gratitude to have that.
What is it like doing the convention rounds and so forth? Is that just a mind-blowing experience?
Early on, yeah.
Was it overwhelming? Was it overwhelming at any stage when you sort of first started doing it? Because I imagine it would have been, pretty wild.
No. It was wild. It was fun. I couldn't believe everyone knew who I was because I'd only been in one episode at that time, and what's not to love when people are praising you?
Have you seen people like cosplaying as Hugh at conventions?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anyone do Picard Hugh yet.
Okay.
So I'm sure that's coming.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure there's people out there putting together their costume and doing their makeup and everything in preparation. Although not that anybody can go to convention, because San Diego Comic Con just got cancelled recently because of everything. So obviously it's going to be a while probably before we'll be able to get into that environment again. But, I'm sure there are people at home getting their stuff ready. So when social distancing regulations ease up a bit, they'll be able to rock it as the director Hugh from The Artifact.
Yeah.
You also appeared in Star Trek Voyager.
I did.
In an episode called The Void, where you played, is it Phantom? Phantom.
Yep.
Yes. Tell us a little bit about that appearance.
Ron Surma was the casting director back in the day on Next Gen and Voyager, and he called my agents and said, look, there's a part literally with no lines, but it's a really big part. It's just the character's mute. Would Jonathan even consider coming in to read for it, to like audition for it? And I was like, I don't know, let me look at it. So I looked at it and I thought, this is like silent film acting. This is fun, this is really interesting. And so I worked on it and I thought, yeah, I'll give this a try. This will be a fun little, I won't be recognized as Hugh, and it'll be a chance to keep doing Star Trek, and had a really good time playing that little role. He was very sweet.
Okay. Are there any funny stories or anecdotes or anything you have from behind the scenes while working on Picard?
The whole thing with having to like not tell anyone and have it be this big secret, driving into set, and I can't believe they were able to keep the secret. I emailed a friend who's a Trek fan, and was trying to, before it was announced, and I was trying to figure out something to do with conventions, and I was like, well, what if I have a friend who's on the show and he wants to know like what conventions are going to be like for him, and he started asking me all these questions, and I was like, oh, what if it was me that was coming back? And he said to me in an email, he goes, don't hold your breath. Meanwhile, I was already shooting it, so I did think that was funny, that he was thinking, like, never in hell will this happen.
As a fan, what would you like to see in Picard Season 2? Are there any kind of things, I'd love to see this, or I'd love to see that in the second season of Picard?
I would like to see more of the Next Gen cast come back in the way that they use Jonathan and Marina so effectively, I thought, and emotionally. So that I'm glad to hear that LeVar apparently is in talks to come back. So
that's great news.
That's great news. That'd be fun. And Whoopi is coming back.
Oh, of course. And I think I also heard that Robert Picardo might be coming to reprise his role as the EMH from Voyager. Perhaps I heard as well.
I think they're being smart about how they're doing it. They're being strategic without having it be a big reunion show. So I look forward to that. I look forward to seeing, I hope Orla Brady gets to come back in some way, even though she's down in the vineyard.
Yeah.
I would love to see that character, a little bit more of that character. Obviously, a lot more of my girl Jerry.
Yep.
It'd be interesting to see if she becomes kind of his number one now, because she's got the goods to be that. So it'll be interesting.
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to it.
As am I. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for having a chat with me today about all things Star Trek Picard and Next Generation and everything. It's been an absolute pleasure.
All right, man.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Bye, Nick. Have a good day.
Cheers, you too.